Hello everybody and welcome to another Twilight Zone review. Today it is Season 4, Episode 14 of Late I Think of Cliffordville, written by Rod Serling and starring Albert Salmi as Bill Feathersmith. And this episode, like some of the other hour-long episodes, I feel like has some really great moments and some really not so great moments. Overall, I think this episode has a lot of great ideas that were ahead of their time. Unfortunately, the execution is off in a lot of places, but I do feel that one of the better twist endings of Season 4 somewhat saves it. So I'll get into all this as I go through the episode. We start with our main character, Mr. Feathersmith, and he's talking to a man named Mr. Dietrich in his office. And you can tell they don't really like each other too much, something that's gone back several years, which we'll find out more about later. And it turns out that Feathersmith is now in a position to pretty much ruin Dietrich, and he doesn't have a second thought about doing this. So we learn that Feathersmith is now a pretty ruthless guy. And then we have a scene where he's getting ready to leave for the night, and he's talking to a custodian. It appears that he's been drinking, and they actually have a pretty good chat. Surprisingly, Feathersmith seems to somewhat relate to this guy pretty well, and they're talking about how it's a coincidence that they both grew up in the same town, a town named Cliffordville. And we also learn at this point that Feathersmith is not content because he says he pretty much has everything and he's bored, and the fun was in getting everything, not having anything, which is an interesting thing to think about. However you feel about that, it's interesting. So he gets off the elevator and he says it let him off on the wrong floor, and he goes into an office and meets a Miss Devlin, and it's pretty obvious by her name what she represents, and she's played by Julie Newmar in a very entertaining performance, which I have to say unfortunately is just too small. The episode could have benefited from more of her because I thought her and her character were very entertaining. But they chat and they talk, and he talks about his past and a girl that he could have liked there if only he would have had time for it. All he did was work. He didn't really have time to enjoy himself. So he says, I have no drive anymore because I'm already at the top, basically. So Miss Devlin tells him that she can send him back into the past. And he says, okay, that sounds fine, but I have some conditions. I have to look like I did then. I have to keep all the knowledge that I already had, things like that, and also that it has to happen right now. And the most significant of these demands is that he has to have all the knowledge that he already has because he figures this will be good and let him capitalize on everything going on in that time period, which seems to make sense on the surface. So Miss Devlin tells him there's a price, and it's not his soul because she already has that, which I thought was amusing based on some of the things this guy has done. She says it's going to cost you money, basically all your money. So he says that's fine because I'll make it all back because I know what's going to happen in the stock market. I know about a property that has oil. I can make inventions before they happen. I'll make a lot of money with my knowledge. So we'll see what happens. I think Mr. Feathersmith will find out this doesn't work as well as he thinks, which is one of the better aspects of the episode. So this is all agreed upon, and I have to say he does finally go back, but this takes half the episode to establish all this. For an episode with Cliffordville in the title, we actually don't spend that much time there. I think it takes too long. I think half the episode was too long to establish all this. But we finally do get to Cliffordville, and he's looking around, and he sees some people there that he knew from the present, like Mr. Dietrich, who we also find out was from there. And he also sees the custodian there that he talked to in his office, which will be very significant later on in the episode. Then he goes to the man who owns the land, who has the daughter that he liked, and he inquires about the land. The man's name is Mr. Gibbons, I believe, and he wants to know the cost, and he negotiates to buy the land. He also inquires about the daughter. Her name is Joanna, and I won't get into it heavily. I'll just say the scene with Joanna is very strange. This is one of those odd mood changes that this episode has that doesn't work at all. It's a really bad scene in my opinion, and all it really establishes is that Feathersmith is not as into her as he thought he would be. This scene really didn't have a point to me at all. So we go back to a meeting between Gibbons, Dietrich, and Feathersmith, and he does buy the property officially. He gives them the money, and for some reason he decides to gloat about this. Why you would do this, I don't know, but I guess that's just the way he is. And he tells them about the oil that he knows about and how he basically ripped off 2 con men. He beat them at their own game. And then in a twist that I did find humorous, they knew about this all along, but it turns out that there's no way to get at the oil because it's pretty deep, and the right kind of technology hasn't been created yet to get the oil out, which is something Feathersmith hadn't considered at the time. So he didn't totally think this through, basically. Then he goes to talk to 2 men about inventing something, and they're just not interested because they're used to doing things the way where they need a blueprint to create anything. They're not thinking ahead any more than that, which makes sense. So Feathersmith has good ideas, but the time is not right for these ideas, which he's starting to learn. Then we go through this odd scene where he's going all around town trying to get his inventions created, and nobody seems interested. People mock him. They make fun of him. They call him names, things like that. So basically no one's interested in anything he has to say because he's basically not in the right time period for it. So Feathersmith's pretty desperate now. He pretty much doesn't have any money or anything. Basically, he doesn't really have any friends there. And he runs into Miss Devlin again, who's a welcome sight, I have to say. And we find out that he's still 75 years old. He just looks like he's 30. I wasn't really clear as to why this matters in the episode. Was his age that's significant? They didn't really do much with it. I didn't totally get that, but whatever. He was basically tricked in that as well. He wasn't specific in his condition, so he didn't think that through either. So he basically is begging to be sent back. He says, please just send me back. I don't care about anything else, which is another mistake. So she says that she will, but that things are going to be different on the condition that the present will now be affected by the things that he changed in the past, which is, I have to say, the one really cool thing about this episode. It's very effective, and it influenced a lot of later shows and movies. This premise has been used a lot about when you change the past, it affects the present. So I really like that. I just wish the execution of it would have been a little better. So in a last condition, she says you're going to have to pay, I think it's like $40, which doesn't seem like that much, but he doesn't have any money. So she basically tells him you're going to have to sell off the deeds to the property you own. So he's quickly looking for someone to do this because he doesn't have a lot of time, and he runs into our old buddy, the custodian again, who was living in that town, and he sells it to him. So I think we can figure out the ending now, but it must have been a pretty good twist for audiences at the time because I don't remember this theory really being used a lot. Basically now the custodian is Feathersmith. He's in Feathersmith's position, in charge of everything, and Feathersmith is the custodian, and they have a similar chat to the first one they had, only the roles are reversed. A great twist ending that really works. Unfortunately, I feel like this episode takes too long to get going, and a lot of the scenes just come across as over the top or not that interesting. The moods are all over the place in this episode. We do get a couple of great characters, a couple of not so great characters. So overall, I really think this episode's a mixed bag, and I give, of late, I think of Cliffordville a 2.5 out of 5. I do think it's probably worth a one-time watch because it's an interesting concept, especially for its time period. So 2.5 out of 5 for of late, I think of Cliffordville, and as always, thank you very much for watching.